You think sharp minds always see the full truth about you. Yet the smarter they act, the blinder they become to quiet power. If you ever felt underestimated, you are already standing near hidden advantage. When an intelligent person looks at you, their mind does not see you completely. It sees a pattern, a shortcut, a prediction built from previous experiences. Their brain hates uncertainty, so it quickly decides who you are and freezes it. This fast judgment reduces mental effort, but it also creates a silent weakness. They feel safe when they believe they have understood you in the first moment. That feeling of certainty gives them emotional comfort and psychological dominance. They start to relax their guard, because in their mind the game is already won. You become a fixed category, not a changing and evolving threat to their position. Dark psychology begins where this lazy certainty quietly lives inside their thoughts. When someone is sure they understand you, they stop truly watching you carefully. Their focus moves from observation to control, from listening to directing your behavior. They underestimate you because their ego whispers that they read people better than others. Machiavelli once said, "If you let others define you, they will own you." The trap is simple. You accept their quick picture of you as accurate. You then move and speak inside the box they created without full awareness. Their intelligence becomes a cage around your identity, and you cooperate with it. To outsmart this, you first need to understand what their mind is protecting. Intelligent people often protect self-image more than objective reality about others. They need to believe they are rarely wrong, especially in reading human behavior. Admitting they misjudged you feels like losing internal supremacy they secretly worship. So they cling to their first impression even when new signals contradict it. They ignore your quiet strengths, your hidden skills, your rising emotional control. They filter information, accepting only what confirms their original judgment about your weakness. This is called confirmation bias, and it turns intelligence into fragile glass. Your role is not to fight this bias directly with loud resistance. Your power comes from gentle misalignment. You move in ways they do not track. You behave slightly below their radar, never fully matching the role they assigned. You do not protest their judgment. You let it grow comfortable and overconfident. Albert Bandura once said, "If people control their beliefs, they control their actions." When you control what you believe about yourself, their label loses authority. You stop reacting from hurt pride and start responding from strategic self-respect. Their underestimation becomes like a cloak, hiding your true psychological position. Notice how intelligent people often talk more when they feel superior to you. They explain, they advise, they correct, they dominate the invisible emotional air. While they speak, they reveal their fears, desires, and weak pressure points. They tell you what matters most to them, without realizing you are listening. This is where dark psychology becomes a manual for quiet defense and advantage. You listen like a scientist, not like a wounded ego needing validation. You observe how they react when you agree, when you stay silent when you delay. You see which topics make them restless, which make them proud, which make them careless. Each time they underestimate you, your calm attitude deepens their illusion of safety. They assume you are passive, simple, easy to influence and guide. Inside, you are building a mental map of their predictable responses. Their intelligence becomes a machine with visible buttons, and you see every button. The real shift happens when you stop trying to prove yourself to them. The moment you no longer chase their recognition, you free your psychological currency. You no longer pay with emotional reactions, explanations, or defensive justifications. This deprives them of the feedback they need to adjust their control tactics. They keep using the same strategies because they think those strategies still work. They joke in the same style, advise in the same tone, push in familiar ways. You notice patterns repeating like a script that never updates to new reality. Their intelligence now operates on old data, while your awareness keeps expanding quietly. Dark psychology teaches that power often shifts in silence, not in loud confrontation. When someone misjudges your strength, their planning becomes inaccurate and weak. They place you on the wrong square of the psychological chessboard. They move their pieces with confidence, but their mental map is already false. You outsmart them by controlling three invisible elements inside yourself. First, your emotional temperature. You refuse to rise when they provoke or underestimate. Second, your information flow. You choose what to reveal and what to keep hidden. Third, your timing. You act only when their certainty has reached its highest point. When your emotional temperature stays low, their reading of you becomes less reliable. They cannot measure your reactions, so their predictions start missing the target. When your information is selective, they form conclusions from incomplete data. They are sure they see the full picture, but many pieces are missing. This is effortless outsmarting, not because it requires no energy but little visible effort. You are not arguing, not begging, not trying to impress their sharp mind. You are simply refusing to give them the signals they unconsciously rely on. Their intelligence becomes like a strong engine with no correct map to follow. Eventually, a moment always arrives when their misjudgment collides with real circumstances. They expect you to collapse, but you remain stable and quietly effective. They expect confusion, but you answer with clarity that does not seek approval. They feel a small crack in their certainty, and fear begins to whisper. The question is simple and dangerous when that crack appears inside their confidence. Will you step back and comfort their ego, or let the crack slowly widen? You think they watch every move you make with sharp awareness. Yet their confidence blinds them to the signals you intentionally keep unseen. If you understand this blindness, you can guide their perception without force. Intelligent people often build fast theories about others because it protects their mental order. Their mind loves patterns more than accuracy, so they search for shortcuts in your behavior. These shortcuts help them feel in control, but control built on shortcuts collapses quietly. They underestimate you because they trust their inner logic more than your real complexity. The moment they place you in a simple category, their psychological guard begins to fade. You become predictable in their imagination, even if your reality is far more nuanced. They treat you with confident assumption, not with careful understanding or true curiosity. This is where your silent advantage slowly starts to rise beneath their awareness. Dark psychology reveals that misjudgment by intelligent people is not random. It comes from cognitive filters that remove details that do not match their beliefs. If they expect weakness, they will search for signs that confirm it. Your strength becomes invisible to them, not because it is small, but because it is filtered out. When someone filters out your strength, they leave blind spots that you can navigate freely. You are no longer fully watched, you are only partially seen. This gives you psychological room to expand your influence without triggering their defenses. Your controlled simplicity becomes a shield, hiding the movements that matter most. Machiavelli once said, "If others see only a part of you, they cannot predict your power." Their selective vision becomes your silent escape from their expectations. You no longer fight to prove your intelligence to them. You let their assumptions build a wall around their perception, not around your potential. Intelligent people underestimate you more when they feel superior in emotional control. They think they can read your reactions like a familiar pattern from their past experiences. When your reactions become slow, calm, and neutral, their pattern recognition collapses. They begin to miscalculate because the old emotional signals are no longer visible to them. Their intelligence requires contrast to stay accurate. If you show excitement, they measure it. If you show fear, they interpret it. If you show pride, they compare it. But when you show neutral presence, their system has nothing to decode. This neutrality is not weakness, it is psychological fog. They try to define you, yet the definition does not stick. They try to predict you, yet the predictions fail silently. They try to understand your intention, yet the intention stays concealed. In this fog, their overconfidence becomes a liability. They begin to expose more of their own behavior because they think you are not a threat. They speak more about their values, their frustrations, their goals. You learn their emotional architecture while they remain blind to your deeper layers. Albert Bandura once said, "If you regulate your inner world, you shape the outer world." When you regulate your emotional presence, you shape their perception without speaking. You stop feeding their assumptions, and their assumptions start feeding your advantage. Their mind begins to operate on outdated information, while you operate on fresh insight. Dark psychology teaches that silence is not emptiness, it is information starvation. When they get little information, they fill the gaps with their own imagination. Their imagination often paints you as weaker, softer, or less strategic than you are. This illusion becomes the ground on which your true moves remain invisible. You also begin to notice how intelligent people react when they feel misunderstood. Their ego does not tolerate the idea that you may not fully admire their intellect. They try to reassert control through explanations, deeper arguments, or subtle guidance. The more they explain, the more they reveal their internal framework to you. Each revelation gives you a deeper map of their strengths and weaknesses. You learn what triggers their pride, what threatens their identity, what calms their insecurity. You see where their self-image is strongest and where it is most fragile. Your awareness becomes a mirror they cannot see but cannot escape. To outsmart them effortlessly, you must master one hidden move. You match their expectations outwardly, but you think independently inwardly. You allow them to believe you follow their frame, while you stay rooted in your own. This internal independence breaks their ability to shape your choices. Intelligent people underestimate the power of a person who thinks quietly. A quiet mind is unpredictable, stable, and hard for them to manipulate. Their tricks rely on emotional reaction, not silent analysis. When you analyze instead of react, you remove their psychological leverage. Their confidence begins to rest on assumptions, not on verified reality. Their tone stays bold, but their accuracy declines. Their actions look strategic, but they are built on wrong data. They underestimate you because they underestimate their own blind spots. One day, their miscalculation surfaces in a subtle moment. They expect your confusion, but find your clarity instead. They expect your passivity, but feel your grounded presence. Their mind receives a signal it cannot classify, and doubt begins to spread. The question is quiet but powerful. When they finally sense this shift inside you, will they adjust their perception or break under the weight of their own certainty? You think their intelligence gives them access to your hidden layers. Yet the deeper you stay, the more their reasoning collapses quietly. If you control what they cannot see, you control the entire interaction. Intelligent people often rely on rapid mental models because it saves cognitive energy. Their mind builds quick theories that feel sharp but lack quiet precision. They assume they already understand your motives and your internal patterns. This assumption is the quiet doorway through which your advantage begins to rise. When someone thinks they fully understand you, they stop updating their perception. Their mental picture becomes stale, while your inner growth continues silently. You evolve while they remain stuck in their first conclusion about you. This time gap becomes a hidden weapon that quietly bends the power dynamic. Dark psychology teaches that people depend heavily on emotional forecast. They watch your face, your tone, and your reactions for confirmation. But when you regulate your visible responses, their forecast becomes unreliable. Their intelligence cannot operate well without emotional data to decode. You become a puzzle with missing pieces, and they hate unsolved puzzles. Their ego pushes them to fill the blanks with assumptions they consider logical. These assumptions usually reflect more about their fears than your reality. Their misinterpretation becomes a scaffold supporting your psychological position. Machiavelli once said, "If you control perception, you control the field of influence." Perception control begins with strategic unpredictability, not dramatic behavior. You subtly shift your patterns, making your responses steady but not easily categorized. This unpredictability is calm, deliberate, and almost invisible to their awareness. Intelligent people expect your behavior to match their prediction framework. When you do not match it, their thinking loses its internal rhythm. Their mind becomes busy correcting their own judgment rather than analyzing you. Their confidence silently weakens while yours grows behind the curtain. Their tendency to overanalyze becomes your advantage. They read too deeply into small signals because they believe in their accuracy. You keep your signals clean, minimal, and consistent, confusing their interpretive system. Their analysis runs on limited data, making their conclusions fall apart slowly. You begin to see how they misread your silence. They think silence means fear, when silence actually means focus. They think stillness means uncertainty, when stillness actually means strategy. Their interpretation reveals more about their bias than about your intention. Albert Bandura once said, if you adjust your belief, you adjust your behavior. Your belief in your quiet strength reshapes how you hold yourself under pressure. You stop apologizing through tone, posture, or unnecessary explanations. Your presence becomes stable, which is something intelligent minds do not expect from the underestimated. The underestimated person is supposed to seek approval or clarity. When you do neither, they sense something they cannot describe. Their predictions begin to break, but they cannot admit it to themselves. Admitting it would crack the self-image they guard so carefully. Dark psychology shows that pride binds intelligent people more than logic. They prefer being confidently wrong rather than quietly uncertain. They cling to their first perception of you like a shield, protecting their intellect. Their attachment to this shield blinds them from the subtle changes you cultivate. Your power grows through control of emotional temperature. When your reactions remain consistent, you create emotional ambiguity. Ambiguous reactions disrupt their ability to judge your intentions. They cannot calibrate their behavior because your emotional signal stays unreadable. This unreadability becomes a quiet psychological pressure. The more they try to decode you, the more their mind strains. Their confidence drains drop by drop while they pretend nothing is shifting. You watch the shift because you remain detached and observant. Once they feel slightly confused, they try to reestablish control. They speak more, or they explain more, or they guide more strongly. Each attempt reveals deeper truths about their insecurities and priorities. Their vulnerability becomes exposed, while they believe they are displaying intelligence. You collect these details with the precision of a silent observer. You learn what they defend, what they hide, and what they fear. You learn what expectations shape their decisions and where their emotional armor cracks. Your knowledge becomes a silent map they do not know you possess. This map allows you to choose when to step forward and when to step back. You adjust your presence to keep them inside the illusion that they still lead. You do not challenge their intelligence openly because that would trigger defense. You let them guide themselves into the very blind spots they created. By appearing slightly unassuming, you make their confidence grow unchecked. When confidence grows without real foundation, it becomes fragile. They speak with certainty, but the certainty rests on outdated understanding of you. Their intelligence becomes a tower built on sand, tall but unstable. Your calm unpredictability becomes the quiet erosion beneath their tower. Each moment they misread you is another grain removed from their foundation. At first, nothing seems to change, then everything changes suddenly. Their perception reaches a point where they realize something is off, but they cannot name it. This moment is where your leverage becomes visible. You now understand their patterns, but they understand nothing about your true pattern. You act from clarity while they act from assumption. This asymmetry changes every interaction without a single word spoken. Your advantage does not come from overpowering their intelligence. It comes from letting their intelligence trap itself. The smartest people fall hardest when they trust their mind too much. Ego makes them analyze without verifying, decide without observing, and speak without recalibrating. Their underestimation becomes a psychological script you no longer belong to. You slip out of the role they gave you, but they keep treating you as if you are still inside it. This mismatch destroys their ability to predict your movement. Their control attempt becomes noise that no longer reaches you internally. Eventually, there comes a moment when they must face the truth. Their assumptions fail, their predictions collapse, their confidence trembles. You remain centered while they search for reasoning that no longer exists. Their mind asks a question it never wanted to ask. The question is quiet but sharp. When their intelligence finally reveals its own weakness, will you remain hidden or step forward and change the balance completely? You think they track your intentions with perfect clarity. Yet the clearer you become to yourself, the more their certainty dissolves. If you master your inner signals, their entire judgment system breaks silently. Intelligent people often rely on predictive thinking because it makes them feel superior. They assume their mind works faster, deeper, and cleaner than yours. They believe they can anticipate your moves before you even define them. This belief forms the silent chain that locks them inside their own overconfidence. The more they trust their prediction, the less they verify the reality in front of them. They start reacting to the version of you inside their mind, not the real you. Their intelligence becomes a loop feeding itself with outdated impressions. You quietly evolve while they remain stuck inside their first assumption. Dark psychology explains that intelligent minds collapse when their forecast fails repeatedly. Each failed prediction creates micro cracks in their confidence. These cracks do not scream, they whisper, and those whispers add pressure. You do not force these cracks, you simply refuse to be predictable. Your unpredictability is not chaos, it is composed calm. You respond slower, you speak less, you reveal minimal emotional cues. You give no fuel for their analytical engine, and the engine begins to stutter. They misinterpret your stillness as simplicity, and simplicity as psychological weakness. This misinterpretation is your silent armor. It protects your intentions while exposing their ego-driven assumptions. Machiavelli once said, "If your enemy misreads you, your victory begins early." Their misreading becomes a weapon you never even had to lift. Intelligent people underestimate you because they trust the wrong indicators. They read tone but ignore intention. They read reactions but ignore inner discipline. They read silence but ignore hidden growth. This creates a gap between what they think you are and what you truly are. The bigger the gap gets, the more unstable their perception becomes. Your presence becomes a quiet contradiction they cannot fully decode. This contradiction threatens the self-image they rely on for intellectual dominance. To outsmart them effortlessly, you must master the psychology of controlled presence. Controlled presence means staying aware of how your energy affects their certainty. You do not match their emotional pace, you let them chase your rhythm instead. When they chase your rhythm, they lose the anchor that stabilizes their analysis. You also observe how their ego reacts when they feel misunderstood. They explain deeper, not for your clarity but for their reassurance. Every unnecessary explanation exposes their internal pressure points. You store each detail like a secret instruction manual about their behavior. Albert Bandura once said, "If you understand your reactions, you reclaim your direction." When you reclaim your direction, you stop feeding insecurity-driven patterns. Your calm becomes a mirror that forces their internal conflicts to surface. They begin projecting fears, doubts, and assumptions without realizing it. These projections tell you more about them than their intelligence ever will. You see what they pride themselves on, what they fear losing, what they silently crave. Your role is to notice without revealing that you notice. Your observation must remain hidden because visibility removes your advantage. Dark psychology teaches that the one who observes more controls more. Control does not come from force, it comes from awareness. When you stay aware of their emotional temperature, you stay ahead of their strategy. Your awareness becomes the invisible thread guiding the interaction. Intelligent people underestimate the danger of someone who does not react. Reaction is what gives them power, prediction, and emotional dominance. When you break the cycle of reaction, you break their ability to categorize you. They do not know whether you agree, disagree, fear, or challenge their position. This uncertainty pushes them into a subtle state of mental agitation. They try harder to regain clarity, but their efforts reveal internal insecurity. They analyze your silence, but your silence offers no stable outcome. Their intelligence becomes noise, and your composure becomes command. Over time, you begin to notice shifts in their behavior. Their voice gets slightly sharper when they feel their predictions slipping. Their confidence shows tiny fluctuations, even if they hide them externally. Their ego becomes restless because your unpredictability disrupts their intellectual identity. You maintain your stillness because stillness is power. Stillness keeps your motives invisible while theirs become transparent. Stillness forces them to fill the silence with their own interpretations. Those interpretations reveal more vulnerability with each passing moment. When they underestimate you, they give you room to move strategically. You choose when to reveal small hints of strength, clarity, or boundary. These hints shake their confidence because they do not fit their original model of you. Their mind struggles to adjust because adjustment requires humility. But humility is the one skill intelligent people often refuse to practice. They confuse stubborn certainty with intellectual superiority. They hold on to their first judgment about you with a rigid grip. This rigidity becomes the chain that restricts their ability to understand you correctly. As they cling to outdated assumptions, you gain silent psychological distance. Distance gives you clarity, clarity gives you leverage, leverage gives you direction. You no longer stand inside their mental frame, you stand above it. They try to reach you with old interpretations, but you are no longer there. The moment arrives when their perception fails in a situation that matters. They act based on the weak version of you they created. But your inner self is far stronger, calmer, and more strategic than they expected. Their mind confronts a version of you that does not match their theory. Their internal conflict begins, and the question forms silently inside their thoughts. When their certainty collapses in front of your quiet strength, how will you use the shift that follows? You believe they measure every detail of your behavior accurately. Yet the more confident they feel, the more their perception bends inward. If you learn how this distortion works, their intelligence becomes predictable. Intelligent people often assume that confidence equals accuracy. Their mind convinces them that sharp thinking automatically leads to correct judgment. They forget that intelligence without emotional awareness becomes a trap. This trap creates the illusion that they can never be wrong about someone like you. The moment they form this illusion, their observation weakens. They start watching you through the lens of their ego, not through the lens of reality. Every move you make is filtered by their belief that they understand your limits. This filtering hides your true depth from them, giving you strategic invisibility. Dark psychology reveals that the underestimated individual holds a unique advantage. Your disadvantage becomes a mask that protects your real psychological position. They see the mask and never suspect the face behind it is far more controlled. You maintain this mask by removing emotional signals they depend on for analysis. The less emotional data you show, the more their assumptions fill the gaps. Their assumptions become louder than your actual presence. Your minimal reactions confuse their analytical rhythm. Their mind starts generating predictions that drift further from reality. This drift creates cognitive dissonance, the silent tension between belief and truth. The greater the tension becomes, the more unstable their confidence grows. Confidence without accuracy becomes a loud but hollow structure. You stand quietly while their structure begins to shake under its own weight. Machiavelli once said, "If you make others feel correct, they blind themselves." You let them feel correct because their self-assurance becomes your protection. Their belief in their correctness makes them careless with interpretation. Your neutrality acts like a mirror, reflecting their own bias back to them. Intelligent people underestimate you further when they do not feel challenged. They expect subtle competition, clear reaction, or visible resistance. When none of these appear, they assume you lack strategic awareness. The real awareness is that you understand the power of being underestimated. Your silence forces them to expose their assumptions more clearly. They reveal inner beliefs, unspoken fears, and emotional weaknesses. These revelations happen because they think you are not analyzing them. Yet every word they speak becomes part of a psychological blueprint you store quietly. Albert Bandura once said, if you learn how people think, you learn how they act. You begin to see how their thinking shapes their emotional rhythm. You notice their recurring triggers, repeated phrasing, and subtle changes in tone. Each pattern tells you how they respond under pressure and uncertainty. This knowledge gives you a form of control that they never notice. You do not need to confront their ego to hold advantage. Your advantage is built on observation, consistency, and internal discipline. Your discipline stops you from reacting to their superiority display. Their superiority display is predictable, even if it looks confident externally. They try to speak with authority to maintain the image of intelligence. They analyze rapidly to protect their identity as a strategic thinker. They react strongly when they feel their understanding might be incomplete. Your calm disrupts their internal certainty because it does not match their expectation. They expect predictable reactions, not composed neutrality. They expect emotional cues, not controlled presence. They expect agreement or challenge, not quiet independence. When you give them none of these, their system loses balance. Their mind overcompensates by assuming even stronger conclusions about you. These conclusions are often wrong, but their ego refuses to adjust. Their refusal to adjust is where their intelligence becomes rigid. Rigidity is the weakness of every intelligent but prideful mind. Rigid minds underestimate flexible minds because flexibility looks passive. You are not passive, you are deliberate, and your deliberation is invisible to them. This invisibility is what makes your position stronger than they realize. Dark psychology teaches that control belongs to the one who manages the pace. When you slow your emotional pace, you slow their interpretive speed. They struggle to read intentions that do not match their predicted timeline. Their need for clarity becomes a pressure point you can use effortlessly. You begin adjusting your timing to weaken their confidence further. You respond slightly later, but with calm consistency. You answer with measured tone, not defensive energy. You shift your presence in small ways that their mind fails to track. These micro-shifts confuse their internal model of you. Their predictions miss more frequently, and the gaps increase over time. Each missed prediction deepens the internal cracks inside their intellectual certainty. These cracks grow silently because they refuse to admit the possibility of wrong judgment. Your clarity becomes sharper as their clarity fades. You see their blind spots, but they do not see yours. You act from awareness while they act from assumption. This asymmetry gives you real power, even if they never acknowledge it. Eventually, their behavior exposes something deeper. They begin seeking reassurance from you in subtle ways. They repeat their arguments, restate their opinions, or emphasize their strengths. These behaviors are signs of internal uncertainty disguised as authority. You notice their tone shift when they feel their prediction about you might be flawed. They try to speak with more certainty than before. Certainty without stability becomes a signal of internal pressure. Their pressure grows because your presence no longer fits their expectations. The moment your true intelligence becomes visible to them, everything changes. Their assumptions collapse because the weak version of you disappears. They must reconcile the gap between who they thought you were and who you actually are. This reconciliation forces them to question their own cognitive accuracy. Intelligent people fear being wrong more than being challenged. Being wrong threatens their identity, not just their opinion. Their mind begins to feel unsafe when their understanding of you fails. This emotional instability forces them to re-examine their entire interpretation. You stay calm during this process because your calm gives you control. Their confusion will rise, their behavior will shift, their tone will fluctuate. You will watch all of it with the same composed presence that created your advantage. You do not need to prove anything because the truth reveals itself. And then comes a moment that tilts the entire dynamic. They realize your silence was not submission, but strategy. They realize your calm was not weakness, but discipline. They realize your unpredictability was not confusion, but design. Their mind faces a truth it tried to avoid. If they were wrong about you once, How much more have they failed to see that still remains hidden? You assume their intelligence protects them from losing control. Yet the more they rely on their mind, the more power slips from their hands. If you understand this final shift, you control the entire psychological field. Intelligent people often hold an inner belief that their insight is superior. They think they see deeper and farther than you, even when they never tested it. This untested confidence becomes the root of every miscalculation they make. The smarter they feel, the more blind they become to their own hidden flaws. Their biggest flaw is simple: they trust analysis more than awareness. Analysis depends on data, but you gave them almost nothing. Awareness depends on presence, but your presence stays controlled and unreadable. Without accurate data or emotional signals, their intelligence begins to drift. Dark psychology explains that drifting minds search for safety through assumptions. Assumptions become their anchor, even when the anchor is attached to nothing. They treat their own interpretation of you as absolute truth. This truth becomes the foundation of their confidence and the beginning of their fall. You shift quietly, and their foundation cannot move with you. Each time you hold your silence, their prediction weakens. Each time you remain calm, their ego shakes slightly. Each time you refuse emotional reaction, their system loses more accuracy. Machiavelli once said, "If you let others overestimate themselves, they weaken their throne." You allowed them to overestimate their judgment, their insight, and their understanding. Their overestimation made them careless, exposing their real vulnerabilities. Your patience allowed their illusion to grow until it became too heavy to support. Intelligent people underestimate you most when they think you are predictable. Predictability feels safe. It allows them to maintain psychological authority. But you removed every predictable reaction they expected from you. Your stillness became uncertainty, and your uncertainty became power. Your power comes from internal alignment, not external display. You know what you feel, but you do not show it. You know what you think, but you do not reveal it. You know what you observe, but you store it quietly. This internal alignment creates psychological gravity. Gravity pulls their attention, their confusion, and their insecurity toward you. You do not force influence. Influence begins to grow naturally. Your presence becomes a stable center that contrasts their shifting certainty. Albert Bandura once said, "If you control your inner belief system, you control the outcome." Your belief in your quiet strength rewrites the entire dynamic silently. You no longer react to their superiority display, you watch it with clarity. Your clarity becomes the invisible line that separates your awareness from their illusion. You understand their blind spots better than they understand your intentions. They underestimate your ability to analyze, observe, and adapt. Yet you have been analyzing them from the first moment they misjudged you. Their misjudgment gave you information they never meant to reveal. You saw their emotional pressure points, their pride, their biases. You learned which reactions they depend on, which cues they trust, which narratives they protect. You learned how their intelligence collapses when prediction fails repeatedly. You learned how their confidence shakes when their internal model stops matching reality. The underestimated person is dangerous for one reason. You grow while they remain stuck in outdated belief. Your growth breaks their psychological map. Their map loses roads, loses structure, and loses accuracy. This forces them into a silent crisis of perception. They begin to doubt their reading of you, but doubt threatens their identity. So they act with more confidence, more certainty, more intellectual posture. But this posture only reveals how unstable their map has become internally. Dark psychology teaches that the moment of collapse is never loud. Collapse happens silently inside their perception before it appears outside. You see the signs before they do, because you have been watching with discipline. Their tone changes, their certainty trembles, their explanations grow longer. These are signals of internal disruption. Signals you caused without force, manipulation, or confrontation. Your stillness and unpredictability created a psychological imbalance. They realize they cannot categorize you, and this creates fear disguised as logic. You remain calm while they attempt to rebuild their understanding of you. But rebuilding requires admitting they were wrong, and their ego resists this. So they enter a cycle of analyzing you while doubting their own conclusions. This cycle weakens the core of their intellectual confidence. When the moment arrives, their mask slips slightly. They hesitate before drawing conclusions about you. They watch you more carefully, but reveal more uncertainty in their eyes. Your presence becomes the variable they cannot control or decode. This is where your true advantage becomes undeniable. You gain psychological ground not through force, but through mastery of self. Your silence became strategy, your calm became power, your neutrality became shield. Their intelligence became noise, and your awareness became direction. You now hold the position they never wanted you to reach. You are no longer the underestimated one. You are the unpredictable one. You are no longer the simple one. You are the unreadable one. You are no longer inside their frame. You shattered it quietly. And in the final shift, something unexpected happens inside them. They begin to respect what they cannot understand. They begin to fear what they cannot predict. They begin to question the strength they once dismissed. Their mind asks a question it never wanted to face. If they were wrong about your weakness from the beginning, what hidden strength will you reveal next that they are still unprepared to handle?